Hello and welcome to another episode of Content Creators Unite, the show where we discuss all things content creation. So if you want to learn how to grow your business using your blog, newsletters, ebooks, and more, hey, you're in the right place. So I'm your host, John Clements, and I'm super excited about today's guest. Her name is Philippa Gamse. Philippa has clocked over 25 years in digital marketing strategy and analytics. She's consulted with nearly 500 clients. She's worked with websites that have cumulatively generated hundreds of millions of dollars. So if you're not already interested, I don't know what to tell you. But owners and marketing executives hire Philippa to find hidden insights that are in their web analytics that will grow their business and cut wasted spending. She's helped clients all over the world basically translate numbers into transformational ideas that move their businesses forward, reveal opportunities for new markets, products, and services, and maximize the return on investment. Philippa, welcome to the podcast.
Yes. Good morning, John. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
Awesome. So I kind of looked at your LinkedIn a little bit. I looked at your background. You've got a very extensive background. On top of everything I just said, you've done so many other things too, which is amazing. Can you just share a little bit with our audience about your background and kind of how you got into doing what it is that you do?
Well, actually, I was quite interested in analytics very early on because that really tells you what's going on. And I mean, because the potential of analytics when you're talking about digital analytics is so much more than what used to be in sort of the physical world, right? So, for example, if you publish a magazine or a newspaper, you know your circulation numbers. So you know how many you've sold. But what you don't know is how many people actually saw each individual magazine because they might have passed it around the family or friends or whatever. You don't know which pages they read and which particular content they were most interested in. And as content creators, all of that is really helpful information. And all of that is available through digital analytics. So it gives us so much more power and data that we can use to create better content and reach more people. So I just always thought that was a very exciting potential.
I love that. So I'm gonna be honest with our guests, with our listeners. The reason that I wanted you on the show is because I don't understand analytics. I don't. So when I look at my own website metrics on like Google Analytics, it might as well be hieroglyphs to me. Like I just don't know what I'm looking at. So what I would like to ask you is, like, I'm a complete novice. My guess is some of my listeners probably are on the newer side. So like, how would you consult someone to just get started in this? Like, what does it even look like to just start looking at your metrics?
Right. So you know what? If I was doing that, say, for example, with you, we wouldn't look at your metrics. I mean,
oh, okay.
There you go. Right.
There we
That's
go.
not where you start. Where we would start would be that we would sit down or do this kind of online thing, obviously, and talk about your business. And I would be asking you, what is your business about? And what are your goals? What are you trying to do with your business? And then, take that to what are the goals for your website? So we need to before we look at any numbers, we need to get really clear about, why do you have a website for your business? What is it trying to do? And not only, most people will say, I'm trying to make sales. And we would look at what that means and how you do that on the site. But also many sites have other goals, other sort of mini goals along the way. I mean, obviously revenue for any business is the biggest goal.
Yeah.
But, maybe you've got a newsletter that you want people to subscribe to, or, you want people to be listening to your podcasts and that kind of stuff. So we would really talk about and get clear on all of the different things that your website is trying to do for you. Right. And with that in mind and with a good understanding of that, then we can look at the metrics, because now we know what we're looking for. Because what we're looking for is, are those things happening? If so, what's going well there? What are the kinds of things that generate those things happening? So is it particular kind of traffic, that particular type of visitor? Right? Is it because they see particular pages, or what particular content that really gets them going, or And if it's not happening, or it's not happening to the extent that you would want, again, we would start looking at, well, why is that? Are there roadblocks? Are there places where they get stuck or confused? Are there places where clearly there's no call to action, so they don't know what to do next, right? But so the key point is, we're not just looking at your numbers, because obviously it's overwhelming. And I mean, I like to joke. I've never yet been hired by a client who's come to me and said, Philippa, please give me 50 pages of analytics reports every week. That's what I want, right?
Who wouldn't want that?
You're right. What they want is not potentially not even to see any analytics reports at all, because my favorite question from a client that I go, this is going to be somebody I really want to work with, is when they say, Philippa, what do I need to know to run my business better? That's the point. Right. It's not looking at the analytics. The analytics is a tool. But the reason you're looking at the analytics is because of that question. What do I need to know to run my business better?
Oh, so that's super interesting. So do you have like an example? So that's a great starting point, but it helps me if I can hear a story. Is there do you have like a story of a client that you had that conversation with, and kind of how that evolved?
Yeah. I mean, let me think of any blog. The biggest mistakes that I see with blogs are that people don't put calls to action and links in their blog. So you can write some really interesting content, but the visitor can come to your site, they can read your content, they can really enjoy it. And these days with analytics, we know that they're reading it. I mean, people have heard a lot about bounce rate. Bounce rate means the number of people who come to your site and only go to one page, leave very quickly. Analytics have got much more sophisticated about calculating that, because it used to be that if they only saw one page and then left, that was called a bounce. But that means if somebody reads your blog page or post, they read the whole thing and then they leave, that was called a bounce, which it isn't necessarily, because they have actually engaged with your content. But the point is, if they're engaging with your content and they're reading that whole blog post, what do you want them to do next? And that's such a key question all the time. And so I can give you examples from different businesses. For example, I worked with a flooring business, and they had a blog about all sorts of different types of carpeting and flooring materials and so on, which is very interesting. Lots of different advice about when to use different materials, colors, prices, the whole deal, right? But what they weren't doing was linking when they talked about a specific type of material to the other parts of their website, right, where they sold those materials, or they sold installation or quotations or whatever it was that they wanted you to actually do, because there aren't many sites that their goal is for you to come and read their content and go away, right? Literally go away. So leveraging from your content into your calls to action is really important, because people won't stop to work out what you want them to do almost all the time, unless they really, really, really want what you've got, right? So that's, as I say, the biggest mistake is look at your content, try to find places where people would be saying, this is interesting, I wonder how I engage further with this business. And right there and then, give them a call to action or give them a link, not at the bottom of the page, because they may not get to the bottom of the page, but right at that point where they could well be thinking, tell me more.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I like the idea of having a call to action where it makes sense, which could be at the end of the page. I mean, that's what often it is, but it could also be somewhere else. That's a good tip. I hadn't really thought about that, to be honest.
Well, if you think about Amazon, I mean, okay, so Amazon's not a content creator, but, Amazon has a buy this now, one-click buy now button right at the top of the page. Because why? Because if you have a product, you want it, you don't need to know any details, you don't need to read the reviews, you just want what you want and be out of there. Boom, you can do that. And they invented it, and now a lot of people do it because it's a really great idea. But one of the things that we can do with analytics is to see how much of our content people consumed. So, for example, if we have a longer blog post, we can see how many people actually got to the bottom of the page. as opposed to, halfway down the page or whatever.
So how would you, that's a really good question, actually. How would you find that out? So would that be something I could find out on Google Analytics just with my free stuff? Or is that like I have to go out and get a consultant and pay a bunch of money to figure this out?
Right. With Google Analytics in its default state. So, okay, Google Analytics, there's a reasonably new version of it, which a lot of people are less happy with than the old version. But the truth is, it's incredibly customizable. And it's really powerful if you know what you're doing. And yes, sometimes, it can help to bite the bullet and get somebody like me to just even set it up for you initially so that you understand what it does and what you can get from it and do some of that customization. So the answer to that specific question is the default state of Google Analytics, which needs a little tweaking, usually, in my opinion, will let you know when somebody has got 90% down a page. But 90% is a lot for most pages, right? That's almost at the bottom. And so you can program in custom parameters that say, no, I want to know when somebody's like 25, 50, 75 or whatever. But that does require a little tweaking. But, it's not that difficult to do. And as I say, one thing you could consider is getting somebody just do some basic customization and settings for you so that at least you've got that kind of information. But for example, again, going back to content, Google Analytics can measure other things like how much of a video people watch or how much of a podcast people listen to. Or how many people start filling in your lead form or your contact form and then don't finish filling it in. Because all of those are examples of where something could be going wrong. So, for example, I had a client who is prolific. He makes video after video after video, and he's quite well known. But he was absolutely stunned to hear that his videos were. He had a really boring introduction, which went, good morning, my name is, and blah, 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 and I do this and I do that. And, and people, especially if they already know him, don't want to hear that every time. And so about 50% of the people who started watching a video had gone within the first 30 seconds. And about 90% had gone within the first minute. And that's a huge drop off in audience. And that is something that I've seen is not unusual. If you don't make your video or make your podcast so that, you really start off with a really strong hook that says, you need to listen to this because I'm going to tell you this, this, and this. And towards the end, right, I'm going to tell you, or I'm going to offer you, or whatever, so that it's really important that you listen to the whole thing. And if you do that, then usually hopefully your content consumption will go up. But it's kind of galling to know that you've made all these videos and you've lost 90% of your audience really early on. But the only way you could know that is by analytics. So that's where even a little customization can be really, really helpful. Now, Google Analytics will do that for you if you're using YouTube video. It won't automatically do it for you if you're using like Vimeo or something like that. It can, but again, somebody like myself can probably set that up for you. And then obviously once it's set up, you can run with it.
Nice. So yeah, I've as I dig into podcasting and videos, and I've learned some of those things, which you give me some things to think about for sure, about like good introductions and good kind of like leading the people and saying, we're going to cover this and wait till the end because you won't believe what we're going to cover right then.
Yes.
So there's definitely,
and you don't want to make it all hokey and cheesy and horrible because, but if it's credible and it's good, people are going to want to listen.
Yeah, I love that. So you talked to... So I love these stories because it really helps me to understand. Because again, I'm not a necessarily technical person. I love the stories, but you mentioned a big thing that you help people with is ensuring they have calls to action. So I'm big on I'm a writer, I'm an editor. I'm big on calls to action as well. So one of my questions for you was, how do you counsel people with regard to like what those calls to action are? Do you say you should really have one major call to action that is on all of your blog posts, or you should mix it up depending on what you're doing? Like what would you counsel someone with something like that?
So I think it depends on each piece of content or each blog post, and like what the mindset is that you're expecting and what the outcome is that you're expecting. Because you've got to think about it's like a conversation, right? I mean, the person on the other end is a person, and they've got things that they're interested in, and so on. And maybe they've come to a particular blog post because of that particular content. And as I said, I'm a big fan of calls to action, and I mean, a link can be a call to action, right? You just link to another piece of your content or your products. I mean, obviously, if you're talking about products, then links to where people can find those products is really important. But I don't think that there should be a set place where you have a call to action. I mean, obviously, okay, at the bottom of the page, you might do that. But as I said earlier, I also think that if you have some sort of awareness or feel for where people might be saying, that's interesting, I'd like to learn more about that, then put a call to action there, or have a sidebar where you've got, our most popular blog posts, that kind of stuff, where you can get little widgets and embed them to do that kind of stuff, right? Just ways of keeping people engaged with your content.
So it sounds to me like when you speak about call to action, you're and correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like you're being broad with that definition. That could be, I want to increase my retention rate. I want to get people to click on 2 or 3 links on my site. It doesn't have to be, I want them to buy my thing. It could be some other goal that they might have.
So, yeah, I mean, as I said, the first conversation we would have would be, what do you want to happen? And so you, at that point, would have said, yes, I want X business, but I also want to increase my retention rate. I would like people to, on average, read more than one article, or that kind of thing, right? So the point of a call to action is just to point people to what you want them to do next. Because as I said, in my experience, people won't necessarily figure that out, or they'll do something that wasn't necessarily what you want them to do. And people, it's amazing. One of the things that I know is that you can get so close to your own content that it is completely not clear to you what people do and don't see. I mean, okay, not a content site, but I can give you a business example. I recently had a client who decided to have a project of selling off all of last year's inventory, to have a sale that went, for a month, to sell off all of his last year inventory so that he could move on to the incoming product. And he couldn't understand why the sales page for this monthly sale, which, was on its own page, wasn't getting a lot of traffic. And I said, well, where's the link? So I come to the homepage, and he said, look, the link's obvious. It's right there in the menu, in the navigation. And I said, yeah, but what if I don't click on that menu? What if I don't click on the right links in the navigation? The main content on the homepage was still his primary business, and the monthly sale was further down the page, below what you would see when you opened it up. So if A, I didn't click on the menu links, and B, I didn't scroll down the homepage, I would never have known about the sale. And I said to him, look, if this is your most important priority for this month, that sale should be front and center on the homepage, right? Because people know what your regular business is, and you can see that all over the site. But if you have this specific special one goal, you really want to put that in front of people. And he said, and he was saying, but the link is right there, you can see it. And that was the point, is where all your content is and where all your links are. But it's really important to remember that somebody who's seeing your site for the first time doesn't have that, right?
Yeah, that's so in my job, I'm an editor, I'm a writer, and that is something I stress as well all the time is you can get, like you said, too close to your own content, and exactly what you mean, and
Right.
exactly what everyone else should do. But the problem is none of us has ESP. That's right. That's the
Right.
problem. So.
Right. And actually, that speaks to another problem that, a lot of, I mean, you said to me that you were interested in having me chat with you because I told you that I can talk about this in plain English, which hopefully I am,
Yes.
without blinding you with technical terms. But the point is that every industry has its technical terms and its jargon. And one of the other things I talk a lot with clients about is are you using too much jargon in what you're writing in your content, right? Because do people understand? And I mean, for example, if I work with technical companies, or they assume that everybody understands their language, but especially if they're B2B, often people come to their websites who might be, the finance officer or the guy who's got to write the check because the techie person has said, I want to buy this off of this company. And somebody else comes along to do some due diligence, and they don't understand all the techie stuff, but they want to know if this company is credible and if they trust them and if they're going to write them the check. And so you need at least the About Us page in English. But you also, if you want to do well in search, you've got to think about your audience, because if your audience if all of your stuff is kind of in technical language, again, do the people that you want to find your site speak that and use those technical terms? Because if they don't, they're not going to find you, right? So I have a very classic story about that if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, please share.
It comes from a while ago, but I used to do, some years ago, I used to do search engine optimization, which I don't anymore. I'm really now focused on analytics and strategy. But I worked for an association of plastic surgeons, and they had a member benefit, which was that members of the public could come and look up their member database to find a surgeon. Right. And they said to me, we want to be number one in Google for the search term rhinoplasty. And I said, right, yes, I'm sure I can get you to be number one in the search for the search term rhinoplasty, because there's not a lot of competition for that, because the average person is not going to be looking for that word, are they? They're going to be looking for
nose job, I would have guessed.
Right. I know. I do some speaking. Whenever I tell this story, when I'm speaking, I pause there and the whole audience screams nose job.
Nose job. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
And they weren't too happy, because they said, look, we're professional surgeons, we have to use professional language. And I said, absolutely. But you've also got to attract your audience. So you need to go to your audience in ways that they understand, with language that they understand. Then you can tell them that the posh name for it is a rhinoplasty, fine, but yeah.
Oh, that's a wonderful story. And it's kind of funny, because if you look at my LinkedIn page, like a lot of things you're mentioning, I say the same things, which is wonderful. Right. So it's wonderful to have a little verification there. Thank you. Or validation, I guess is the right word.
Right. And I can tell you actually that if you want to know more about what your audience, the words they use, another thing that's really important for content creators, where you have a ton of content on your website, is to have a search engine actually on your site. So this is not, now we're not talking about Google, we're talking about your own website, having an internal search engine, which again, these days there's a lot of kind of plugins to do that.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And that means then you can go to the analytics, because the analytics will tell you what people are actually typing into that search engine. And that is fantastic market research, because you can see what words people use to describe what they think you should have. And that tells you about the level of jargon and geek speak that they have. It tells you about typical typos and sort of misspellings and things like that they make. And it also tells you what they expect from you. So like supposing they enter a load of searches for something that's within your area of expertise, but is not currently an offering. Again, I have lots of client stories where we've created new products, including ebooks and content products, informational products, based on searches on the website for stuff that, we haven't written about that, but that's a really good idea, right?
Yeah, well, that's man. I do have a search bar on my website, but I've never looked at it. So guess where I'm going to go after the show? Go check that out. So this is great, because I feel like you've empowered me, like by speaking in just plain English. You've kind of showed me the link between like my business outcomes, which I do understand,
Right.
and maybe like how to approach metrics, which maybe I don't understand as well. So that's like, to me, is the big takeaway, which is amazing. So you're just as billed, just as advertised. As we transition, though, I do actually want to get to know you as a person just a little bit more, because you're more than just work. You are a person. So I'm going to assume that at least some part of your day you're not working. I'll just make that assumption. I know as sometimes as business people that's a rough assumption, but when you're not working, what do you enjoy to do? What's your favorite thing?
Well, we do have a dog, so I actually do enjoy walking. I've read an awful lot of these days. You see a lot of people walking their dog, but they're constantly on their phone, looking at their screen and everything. And I've read that if you really want to walk with your dog, you should leave your phone at home, because it's actually very interesting walking with your dog and seeing what your dog sees, and what she wants to sniff at and notice. And I mean, she loves squirrels, and she'll look at trees and get all excited, and I can't see the squirrel anywhere, right? But so that's and plus, that clears your mind. It's good exercise, and it helps you to come back and think better, I think.
Yeah, I agree. What kind of dog do you have?
Oh, she's tiny. She's an 8-pound Chihuahua Terrier mix.
Oh, fun. That's awesome. She wouldn't know what to do with a squirrel if she caught it, huh?
Oh, she don't know. She never catches anything.
No.
No.
But it's the thrill of the chase, though.
And anyway, the squirrels cheat because they run up the trees, and then she can't reach them.
But I definitely agree with you that putting the phone down and getting out in nature. So for me, it's running. I don't have a dog, but I do run, and it's the same idea, right? I come back with just a clear head and a refreshed spirit. So I completely empathize with you on that one. How about, you've done so much stuff and have such an illustrious resume, and which is, again, just totally amazing, and kudos to you. What's one piece of wisdom or like a life lesson you've learned in your journey? Could be work related, could be life related, that you could share with our audience just to help them be better people.
Better people or better business people? I don't
Either
know.
one, your choice.
Yeah. One thing I would say is I've really learned, I think, to trust my gut. And when I talk to somebody about maybe who's sort of saying, can you help me? And I don't know, something about it just feels off. Or I feel like, I don't think I'm going to enjoy working with this person. Or I think this person is going to be a pain in the, which you sometimes do feel, right? It's probably true, and occasionally I've thought, well, but I need the money, or, whatever, and I've taken them on, and almost always it turns out the way that my gut said in the first place. And honestly, sometimes people, it's just not worth the money in the end. So I don't know if you find the same thing.
I do. Yeah, I find the same thing. I also, one time when I worked in the corporate world, I did take a job for the money one time, and that was a big mistake. So I will not be doing that again.
Right.
But absolutely, yeah. Like, trust in your gut is super important. Philippa, I've had a wonderful, enlightening conversation. I'm going to go back and take notes later when I do the editing. But for everyone else, where can people learn more about you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, you mentioned my LinkedIn profile. I think I'm the only person in the entire world with my name. So it's easy to find me on LinkedIn, and I always enjoy connecting with people. My website is called websitesthatwin.com. And on there, I do have a free ebook, since we've been talking about content, which is called 5 Hidden Gems. And it's about 5 stories from my actual experience, where we've learned something in the analytics that we wouldn't have otherwise known. And from that, we've made a business decision or changed the website in a way that's made a big difference. And, in line with my mission, which is to help people understand this in plain English, but understand why it's so important that you use analytics. There's no techie stuff. There's no charts and graphs. It's all hopefully in English and understandable. And the idea is that people can read it and go, I wonder if that could apply to me. I wonder if I could use that idea. So that's on my website. Feel free to go and pick it up.
Excellent. And for our listeners, I will link to all of these resources in the show notes so you can get to them quickly and easily. And if you liked our discussion today with Philippa, hey, be sure to subscribe, because you don't want to miss out on future episodes. We have tons of wonderful guests, learn all kinds of things. And so, yeah, so hit the subscribe button. And so with that, I wish all of you to have a great day, and we will see you next time on the Content Creators Unite podcast.